What's up, guys? It's another MGS. What's up, guys? It's another MGS vlog. No, not vlog. I mean, just like tablet thingy. And today I will actually be taking with you for a little journey. And that journey will be something that's amazing. I'll be doing the most best of the best of the best. I'm gonna react to. No, not. I'm gonna be reacting to like I'm gonna be reacting to on a Shadow Reader creepypasta. So yeah, hold on. Alright, now you guys can see me. Alright, so I will be reacting to I'll be reacting to a Shadow Reader creepypasta. So to Master Ruby Lost episode Bunny Scout Camp by the Shadow Reader. So 41 minutes long. So we're gonna be for a little tasty treat.
Air Canada flies to 6 continents and more than 200 destinations.
My mic's on it.
My parents have always been a huge pain in my butt. And honestly, I don't think they'll ever quit being one either. No matter what I do, or how I do it, they always come back at me with either their disapproving glares, or will actually tell me about how much I'm worthless. Every single moment in my life, they've always had me try and meet standards that honestly
Sounds like my parents.
weren't even possible for me at my younger age. One good example of this would be my schoolwork. Every time I would come in and get my homework done, either my father or mother would grab at it and put their own version of the problems on a scratch piece of paper, and would make me do them. Sometimes there would only be a few of them, but most of the time, there would be more than 30 to 40 new questions that they would hammer onto me. More often than not, it would be questions that didn't even pertain to the subject hand, and would be completely random in nature. To add insult to injury, my teacher, Mrs. Baker, would actually grade these separate sheets of work and then praise my parents for having me do extra work. Honestly, that wasn't even the worst of it. I have many more stories of them that make my blood boil every time I...
Sorry, I'm in a storm. You know, Los Angeles, storms everywhere. But what the Shadow Reader just said, that's... Man, I would hate his parents.
However, none of those stories even match up to the worst thing they've ever done to me in my life. And that's...
Luckily, I moved
they
out
try to
with my
dictate my
brother.
life in every aspect of it. No matter what it was that I did, what kind of clothes I wore, what food I ate, how much money I earned, They would always find ways to try and either suck the fun out of it or use it to control me in numerous ways. I remember it got so bad that I wasn't even allowed to eat a bagged lunch that I got from the deli within my own home, with my own money. And then when I decided to call them out for that, they sent me to my room with no food for the rest of the day. Yeah, they were a pair of narcissists that made my life an ever living hell every
Yeah,
opportunity
you
that
said it.
I got
You
that
said it.
they could get. Of course, like with some people, this narcissism didn't last for too long. I wound up
That's
moving out
good.
of my house at 18 to go to college. However, unfortunately for me, though, they still had different ways of controlling my daily life, even outside of my house. Specifically with controlling how much money I'd get each month. And since they were the ones paying for the college to begin with, no joke, I couldn't really do much of anything. So while I didn't have to face with them, I didn't have to face to them every single day anymore, I was still stuck with their vice grip around my throat. And yet they wonder now why I never talk to them anymore. To lighten up the mood a little bit, after that rather grim startup in my life,
Wow.
I will say that I was at least able to actually choose what I wanted made.
You got to choose. Honestly, I just want to give you a big thumbs up.
In college. And that specific choice of mine was in animation. Well, specifically animation and sound design for children's shows. No, not the ones meant for toddlers and the like, but more aimed for the 12/17-year-old demographic. Honestly, it was an easy task. Actually, no, I'm wrong. It wasn't. But thankfully, my knowledge of that and the like of animation really helped me out a lot. And I was
That's
actually
good.
able to graduate college with a bachelor's degree in animation. However, that's
Nice.
not to say that it wasn't a difficult time for me at college itself. Granted, it's hard for everybody, no doubt about that, but for me, I think it was a little bit worse. In fact, I'd even go so far to say that I was rather lucky, to say the least, as I was honestly very close to getting expelled once for an incident that happened during the middle of my fourth semester in college. For a bit of backstory, I had a roommate. A roommate that basically made year of college, my last year in college, turn into a year-long time of me being home with my parents. His name was Deke. Deke was
Deep. Did you guys hear that? Storms in Los Angeles are bad. Sorry, I just moved in Los Angeles. Sorry, I just moved in Los Angeles. Like 1 week ago. Sorry, I just moved in Los Angeles 1 week ago. Now I gotta go meet this player.
in my own words, basically the love child of both my parents, mixed in with an added punch of psycho in the mix. He was the kind of person whose narcissism showed in very obvious ways, and tainted everything he went near. And to make matters worse, he was one of the most popular guys in college. How? I don't know. It's more or less shocking to me. It was it was shocking to me when I first found out the first time around that he even had friends to begin with. Now, how exactly was Deke a narcissist? Well, to put it bluntly, he treated me like I was absolute garbage and then played it off as if we were friends, or that I deserved it in some way or another. And anytime I would try and call him out, he would start up with guilt trips and how he was going to do a lot of bad things to himself if I ever stopped hanging out with them and being friends with them. And because of the
I mean, Shadow, you're at a pretty bad life. Not gonna lie.
cycle of abuse that I went through at home, he was very easy at manipulating me. Thinking back on it now, I should have beat the ever-living crap out of him when I had the chance.
You
So,
should've.
what does this have to do with the incident that I had went through? Simple. I had finally stood up for myself after having a relatively bad day. After being guilt-tripped for the
Good.
700,000th time by my parent on the phone for not working fast enough in my classes, Deke decided that it'd be a great idea to start guilt-tripping me again for no apparent reason when I got back to my room. Well, all of that anger and rage and abuse that I went through, well, that all came to a head. And
Okay, guys, we're gonna make a part 2 to this. No, we're not. I
hard. While I didn't cause any kind of physical harm to him, even though I should have, I did give him a heavy piece of my mind in a very colorful manner. When I was done with that, needless to say, that didn't go well. In fact, other than a few sniffles coming from his nose, Deke looked absolutely unfazed by what I had just said. However, his eyes said something very different. I didn't get much of an opportunity to read them that well, because he simply walked out of our dorm without another word. Later that night, he would wind up coming back. I had already been asleep at the time after having worked
ads. I'm like, you guys, I don't want ad block, and I never will.
on an assignment for class that was due the very next day. Basically was a full rendering of a small 11-minute animated plot that I was working on for class. Percent of my grade, and if I didn't pass it, then I'd have to either retake the class again, and thus, or I'd have to quit whatever it is that I do, leave college, and then go back to my parents, and that wasn't an option for me. Well, when I woke up the next day and got ready for class, I saw Deke staring at me from across the room on his bed. He looked like he hadn't slept at all that night, but honestly, I really didn't care.
No,
I got my things ready for class and then handed my USB drive with the episode that I'd been working on before class started, to my professor. Now, my professor had originally planned on having open project viewing during the class as well as a presentation, but due to a few complications with some of the equipment, including the projector in the classroom, he told us that he was going to be, viewing every single one of our animation projects personally after class, and then would hand us our grade the very next day. This was a huge relief to me, as I was a very antisocial person, and still am, and I wasn't really wanting to get up in front of the entirety of the 100+ people that were in my classroom at that point and present my project to everybody without having a breakdown. Once the day had finally concluded, I was pretty much free for the entire weekend. I didn't have any classes that I had to deal with, thank goodness, and I had been planning on having a nice, relaxing couple of days for myself.
Good.
However, all those plans were completely and utterly dashed when I opened up my dorm room door, only to find a printed letter from the dean that was quite literally right next to my desk, to sit there and come to his office as soon as I possibly could. I had already felt a pit in my stomach when I had read that note the first time around, but only tightened up even more when I made my way over towards the dean's office. Upon arriving, I was told to sit down in one of the seats. What happened next was something that I can't really explain, as my mind kind of went blank during the duration of the visit, but
What?
if I can recall anything, it was basically the dean yelling at me for something that I wound up sending in as a project of some sort, and that it had caused one of my professors to quit, and that I was going to be expelled for the supposed messed up imagery that I had dared taint the school with. Yeah, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me then, and even now, I still question what in the world he even meant by that last phrase. The last thing that wound up happening in that office before being sent back into my dorm room was being sworn at by the dean and angrily told to, quote, get the hell out of my office, unquote. He used some pretty messed up language, but for the sake of this post, I'm not going to put what he said there. Honestly, when I was making my way back to my dorm, I really had no idea or even clue as to what he was even talking about. I mean, what is it that I had done to deserve the threat of expulsion? My question was quickly answered when I walked into my dorm room, only to find my small green USB drive that I had copied my project on right next to my laptop. I even popped into my computer and lo and behold, my project was right there. But that led me to another major question. If my USB drive was still in my dorm, then what the heck was it that I had handed over to my professor? I started a search around my computer for any kind of answers to the questions that I may have honestly had, but no matter what I did, I couldn't really find anything. Then again, though, my computer was filled with various junk apps and the like that I had downloaded onto it months back,
Oh, yeah,
so it only seems fair that I wouldn't be able to really find anything, at least not without having a heavy search going to my computer, which was what I wound up doing for the next 4.5 hours. I looked through every single file that I had on my computer for any kind of explanation. Video files, music files, documents, .zip files, programs, even my animation software that I had. No answers. I was stuck in a rut for a good long while before I was called into the dean's office again. This time, he was even more ticked off than when I had seen him last time. He basically went off on me talking and apparently saying that I had a messed up video that I had supposedly created and uploaded it to the school's main webpage. Confused, I asked him if I could see what he was talking about, to which he immediately pulled out his laptop, got on the school's website, and then proceeded to load up a video for me to watch. Once the video had finished buffering, the video began with something that I wasn't even remotely expecting to see that day. The Max...
Sorry, I pause a lot. I just have one. I had to move chairs. Sorry, I just have to move chairs because my tablet's almost dead. It's only at 3%.
And all it's doing out of the to say that statement. In fact, I was actually close to falling to the ground in laughter at what I was looking at. However, given the expression that was solidified on the dean's face, I wasn't willing to inadvertently admit guilt by laughing. Once the intro had concluded, the scene that cut out to show the start of the episode. Ruby, Max, their grandmother, Louise, and the rest of the bunnies and all were giddy looks on their faces. Oh, Grandma, this is an exciting weekend! Ruby began her badge. His grandmother chuckled lips, saying, I bet you can't make me either, Ruby. I'm sure that with your talent and skills, you'll be the first to get the badge. Grandma, Ruby said, giving her grandmother a hug. Oh, you're quite welcome, Ruby, dear, the grandmother said, patting Ruby on the head. Ruby then let go of her grandmother and then turned over towards Max, who looked a little bit upset, likely because of the fact that Ruby was going to be gone for the weekend at camp. Ruby, seeing the saddened expression on Max's face, walked up to him and knelt down to meet him eye level and said, You don't need to worry, Max, Ruby began. I promise you that I'll be safe and sound during my camping trip. Mrs. Huffington is going to supervise the trip and make sure that we don't have any problems and that we're all okay. Max's expression didn't, well, break his worried look. Ruby saw this and said, "Hey Max, I have an important job for you to do while I'm away," Ruby said, which immediately caught Max's attention. "I need you to watch over my dolls when I'm away, okay? If you do a good job, I'll bake you I'll bake you a nice mud cake that you like to have." Max's expression immediately brightened up at that phrase, and soon he began to nod his head in agreement. After he did that, the bus immediately pulled into the bus stop. The door to the bus opened up, revealing Mrs. Huffington, dressed in full Scout gear, with a clipboard, making her way down the stairs of the bus. "Bunny Scouts?" Mrs. Huffington called out. "Yes, Assistant Buddy Scout Leader?" All of the bunnies called out in unison. "I'm so glad you all are here today. The campgrounds have been prepared for us and this weekend, so come on up and hand in your permission slips, please," Mrs. Huffington called out. One by one, each of the Bunny Scouts made their way towards the bus and began to hand in their permission slips in the process. While this went on, the scene then cut over to show Ruby giving her brother and her grandmother a big hug before proceeding to say goodbye and make her way over towards the bus. Once she handed in her permission slip, she climbed onto the bus and then made her way over towards her best friend Luis and sat down next.
Tonight is our first middle school party.
I'm guessing you're not the popular kids in school.
If we don't get to that party, I'll die. Fine.
Oh, hell no.
Good boys. Rated R.
Next to her. The bus then turned on and began to drive away from the bus stop. As it slowly did, Ruby looked out the window
This is so sad.
one last time and proceeded to wave goodbye to her brother and grandmother. The scene transitioned over to show the bus making its way down an empty street. As it did so, the scene would cut to show the interior of the bus, showing everybody talking quietly to one another. "Oh boy, Luis, this is gonna be so much fun," Ruby said excitedly.
Oh no, Mom.
"You bet it is, Ruby. I can't wait to get that badge," Louise responded. The camera then cut back to show Mrs. Huffington carefully standing up on the bus, and when she managed to catch her balance properly, she spoke. "Okay, everyone. Before we get to the campsite, I've written down every one of your names and paired you up with a bunny buddy. You and your bunny buddy are going to be working together during the camping trip," Mrs. Huffington said, to which all the bunnies there began to cheer. Mrs. Huffington then motioned for everyone to be quiet, which they all did immediately. Once there was silence again, Mrs. Huffington continued her announcement. "Anyway, once we get off the bus, I'll be handing you all a small envelope to each of you, naming which one of you will be buddying up with who. Remember one thing though, children, whatever you do, do not let your bunny buddy out of your sight. The woods surrounding camp area is very dense, and many bunnies have gotten lost in those woods many times." Mrs. Huffington's cheery voice then took on a slightly serious one rather quickly. "So I ask you all to please be safe. Keep your buddy in check and make sure of it that you lock your cabin doors each night, you hear?" The scene then quickly cut to Ruby, who now bore a rather puzzled expression on her face. She immediately raised her hand. "Yes, Ruby?" Mrs. Huffington called out. Assistant Scout Master," Ruby began. "I thought we were going to set up tents to sleep in." The camera then cut back to Mrs. Huffington, who answered, saying, "Well, normally for a camping trip like this one, we would. However, given the dense nature of the forest and how easy it is to get lost in there, the bunnies that run the camp there have insisted that we instead use the cabins provided at the campgrounds," Mrs. Huffington said before her tone went back to her joyful one. "Besides, my little bunnies, we all still get to enjoy our camping activities, and there's even a cafeteria not too far away from the campsite for us to eat during the trip. Also, it's really hot in the woods this time of year, and I'm sure that you all don't want to get eaten up by mosquitoes and other bugs, do you?" Mrs. Huffington asked. The others simply nodded their heads no before Mrs. Huffington said her last line in the scene and sat back down in her seat. "Good." The scene then cut back to show Ruby and Louise sitting there, a little bit surprised. "Huh, well, I guess we get to bunk in a cabin together," Louise said rather awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess so. Kinda takes away a little bit of the camping experience, but As long as we can have some fun and earn our badges, I don't see there being an issue, Ruby said. Still though, Ruby, why is it that we have to lock our doors at night? I highly doubt that either of us will walk outside. I mean, unless we're sleepwalkers, that is, Louise said. Yeah, but maybe it's there to make sure that, well, like you said, none of us sleepwalk in the forest, Ruby chuckled. Louise chuckled as well and then said, well, knowing how some of these girls are here, it's a possibility. The scene then cut to the outside of the bus, driving down a long road ahead of them, before immediately transitioning over to show the bus parked next to a large, lush field of grass, with about 6 or 7 cabins aligned in a semicircle next to a large lake near it. At the very center of it was a large fire pit surrounded by logs of various sizes and shapes, likely for sitting on. All of the bunnies, including the assistant bunny scout leader, Mrs. Huffington, were all lined up outside of the bus, envelopes in hand. The camera quickly panned to where all the scouts were at. Okay, everyone, open up your envelopes, please, Mrs. Huffington ordered. All of the bunnies there opened up the envelopes in unison, the scene cutting to show Ruby's envelope opening up first. The paper that was in it had the name Louise written down on it, with a number right next to it. The camera then cut out to show Ruby's excited face before Louise walked up towards Ruby, paper in hand, and said, Hey Ruby, guess who's my bunny buddy? Louise asked. Let me guess. It's me, Ruby said in a sarcastic way. You bet it is, Louise answered. Ruby simply smirked at her best friend. Well, Louise, guess who gets to be my bunny buddy? Ruby asked. Who? Louise asked. Me, Ruby said in a sly way before her and Louise laughed together. The scene then panned over to Mrs. Huffington, who stood at the middle of the fire pit before pulling out a small whistle and blowing on it, catching everybody's attention in the process. One by one, all of the bunny scouts there made their way over towards the assistant bunny scout leader. Okay, my little bunnies, Mrs. Huffington called out. You and your bunny buddy go on ahead and make your way to your cabin and unpack. I'll make sure to sound the bell for dinner, Mrs. Huffington said, before dismissing the rest of the scouts to their respective cabins. Ruby and Louise began making their way over towards one of the smaller cabins in the circles, around the fire pit, and then walked in. The scene then cut to show the main interior of the cabin, which really wasn't much except a pair of beds, with sheets, blankets, pillows, and a single window looking out of the forest at the back, a door that led to a bathroom, and lastly, a few dressers right next to the beds, with a small lamp right in the middle. Louise and Ruby then walked over towards their beds, Ruby's being the one closest to the window, and began unpacking. So, Ruby, what do you want to do once we get done unpacking? Louise asked as she continued to unpack her things. Well, seeing as how the lake is just a walk away from the cabins, I think she'll probably go swim for a little bit before dinner. Ruby said, Ooh, that sounds like fun. I'm gonna finish up let's both finish up quickly so that we can get in the water, Louise said before grabbing her swimsuit and walking into the bathroom. The scene then transitioned to show both Ruby and Louise making their way over towards where the lake was, which was actually a pretty far walk judging from the view of the background. As they walked, Louise noticed a path leading into the woods. It was rather narrow, but it looked as though like just 2 people could go through it. Maybe not side by side, but...
Is anybody gonna question that this is actually getting kind of creepy, not gonna lie?
front to back. Hey Ruby, Louise said, stopping at the edge of the trail, to which Ruby stopped walking and turned to her. What's up, Louise? Ruby asked. I found this trail. Maybe it might be a shortcut to the lake, Louise answered. I don't know, Louise. The path we're on isn't too far away from the lake. I doubt that that's a shortcut, Ruby answered, sounding a little bit hesitant. Oh, come on, Ruby, it's not like we're going to get lost in there. And besides, don't you want to go and explore? Louise answered. I don't know.
Guys, you want to touch the fire? You want me to touch the fire?
No, Ruby answered. I'm sure it's fine, Ruby. Besides, isn't exploring the whole reason to go camping anyway? Louise said. Okay, you got it.
Exploring is not the whole point of camping. The whole point of camping is going to sleep camping in a tent and getting your tent ripped up by bears than dying. Sorry.
There, Ruby said. And regardless, we're bunny buddies. And the rules are, you can't leave your bunny buddy behind, Louise said as she began to walk down the pathway, to which Ruby simply snorted a little bit and then followed suit. The two rabbits then started making their way down the path, admiring the various plants and trees in the area, even stopping at one point to eat a few fresh blueberries from one of the bushes. This went on for a good few minutes.
You won't get poisoned, man.
The camera panned over to Ruby, who was busy enjoying the walk. Oh, Louise, this was such a great time, but I think it's time for us to get back to the camp, don't you think? Ruby said before her face froze. The scene panned out to show Ruby, completely alone in the woods. Louise was nowhere to be seen. Louise? Louise, where are you? Ruby said nearly. Out. Just as Ruby was about to lose her mind, Louise popped up behind her and covered her eyes and said, "I'm right here, Ruby. I never left." Ruby immediately spun over towards her friend with a bit of panic in her voice. "Louise, why did you do that? I thought you left me," Ruby scolded. Louise simply giggled at that statement and then began leading Ruby and herself out of the wooded area. "You know I would never leave you here on purpose. I just wanted to play a little camp prank on you, that's all," Louise said with another chuckle. Ruby simply rolled her eyes and said nothing until the two made their way out of the path. However, once they did, the two bunnies began to make their way over towards the path that led to the pond. Unfortunately, though, after a few steps in their direction, the sound of a bell sounded. "Aw, man," Ruby said. "Well, I guess it's time to go and get dinner." "Sorry about that, Ruby," Louise said with a frown on her face. It's alright. Besides, we got 3 full days to go swimming and enjoy ourselves," Ruby said, grabbing Louise by the paw and quickly running back to the tent to go and change.
Like, there's 20 more.
Your channel does not meet our updated eligibility requirements for mobile apps. I'm so strongly webcam and Roblox. Probably because I need to verify my account.
Yeah. But, yeah. So, I'm gonna have to stop this video because it's like 20 more minutes long. And besides, it's 1 in the morning. But it's 1 in the morning, so I'm gonna have to stop this video. And there's like 20 more minutes left. So, and I already hit 31 minutes and 46 seconds. So I'm just gonna put an end to this video. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.